Right, welcome to either my first video or my second video. I can't remember which one I'm uploading first. Mineral Wagon. We're going to do some weathering for a friend of mine. Now, I'm testing the camera angle, so if I keep standing up and you hear a squeaky chair, I apologise. I just want to make sure everything is in focus. I'm going to be using this, which I've never actually used before, but I've seen it used. It's called Rust It. Basically, it's a very thick, rust coloured, believe it or not, paste. So we're going to give that a try. This is going to be the first stage. After that, we're going to do a little bit of airbrush weathering. We're going to use some oil paints to create some rust streaks, and then we'll come back in with the airbrush to sort of blend it all together, and then we'll give it a matte varnish and we'll call it good. So let's make a start, and we're just gonna paste it on. So the idea of this paste, Rust It paste, is to, can you see that? Yes you can. Is to just cover the whole thing, and what we're going to do is we're going to let it dry, and then we're going to pick it off after it's dried. So the thicker you put it on, the longer it's going to take, obviously. Don't have to brush it, you can stipple it, it makes no difference. So let me get this covered. Right, so we've put that on, we've done it on the side as well. I'm actually going to put it on a little bit heavier looking at that. It's not quite as heavy as I would like, especially on this top area. I know it looks a mess and it looks like I've just ruined it. I promise you, I haven't. So like I said, I'm going to let that dry. I'll come back to it in 10 minutes, see what it's like, decide if it needs any longer, and I'll bring you back once it's dry. Right, so let's see if it's dry enough to start peeling some off. I've got a much softer brush this time. One thing I am glad of is that I didn't do the whole body all at once, because I think I would have struggled. I know it still looks horrendous, but it all needs blending in yet with an airbrush. And by the way, you don't have to use an airbrush, it's just my preference, just my personal choice to use an airbrush. You don't need to. This can all be done by a brush. Right, so I had to rush off for my tea, but this is what we're working with so far. It's not heavy. Like I said at the beginning, I've never actually used this Rust It paste, so this is more of an experiment as well. All we're going to do now is we're going to get a nice fine tip brush, just come into these areas here and just dial it back quite a lot. It's in places where I don't want it to be, basically. So it's just a case of using some thinners and a bit of brute force, because it's obviously I've been in my tea, so it's dried on a lot more than I would normally let it. Just acrylic thinners, and we're just dialing it back. I don't mind it being in some areas down there, but I certainly don't want it as heavy as it currently is. Okay, so I'm happy with that where it is now. So the next stage really is to apply a varnish on it to protect what we've just done before we then move to the next step of oil paints, or we could start blending it in now with an airbrush. I think honestly what I'm going to do is we're going to put a varnish on it, and then we're going to go straight to the oil paints, and then we'll blend it all in together at once towards the end. So let me get the varnish out and we'll get ready for a coat of that to be put on. Right, so the gloss coat has dried. I should have timed it, shouldn't I, to see how long it actually took, but I didn't. And what we're going to use next is the oil brush set by Ammo. MIG. And you get 3 colours in here. You get red primer. I don't know if you can see the colour very well on camera. That's a red primer. There's the focus. You get a dark brown, and you get one called rust. Now we're going to use the lighter one and the darker one. We're not going to bother with the dark brown on this occasion. Right, oil paints. A lot of people are scared of them. They take a long time to dry, and I'm talking days to dry. And you also need to use an oil paint thinner. Now these come with a brush, as you can see. I know that brush on camera looks small. It is way too big for what we need. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get a tiny little paintbrush. If you can see that, very small brush, just a fine tip brush, that's all we need. So down here is just my palette, and I'm just going to put a tiny little drop on the end of the brush. Now I'm hoping that my fingers are not in the way, and we're going to dab it on in very small amounts where we think looks good. Apologies about the extreme shaking. So I'm just going to show you up close. It is tiny amounts we're putting on with the oil paints, and you'll soon see why in a second when we get to the next bit. Which brush do we want? So we're going to go for one of this size, and this we're going to dip into the thinners, but more importantly we're going to wipe 90% of it off. Okay, and then what we're going to do is in a downward motion, because obviously that's how the rust is going to form with the water. It's going to bring it downwards, and we're just going to drag it just lightly in as straight a line as you can. Easier said than done. Every time you put thinners on, you must take a lot of it off. So I'm just going to get in close, and I'm sorry if I block the camera, but just let me do a few and then I'll show you what it's looking like. So I'm happy with that. I'm just going to stand up so I can see the camera while I'll show you. So ignore the glare, it shouldn't be as bright as it's looking. But you can see these rust streaks now. They're the ones we've just added with oil paint. Okay. There's some in the door here. Quite hard to see that on camera though. So that's why we put tiny amounts on and drag down with a very small amount of thinner. So now we'll go in with a darker one, darker shade. The darker ones you can't see quite as well, but they are there. There and there. Okay, so let me do the other side and then we'll move to the next stage. Right, so I'm skipping a step now. What we should do after we've done the rust streaks is we should go in with a matte coat then, a matte varnish. Let that dry and then move on to the step that I'm doing now. Again, it's just about protecting the rust streaks that we've just done. I'm going to skip that step and we're going to go straight into, it's time to blend it all together now. We're going to just, I think we're just going to use 2 colours to start with. I'm going to start off with a Model Air colour and it's called dark brown. And then we're going to move on to a Model Air again, dark earth. And we're just going to start to blend all this together now. So as you say, Model Air, These do not need thinning down, but you can thin them if needed, if you feel like you need to. So we're going to start blending everything together now. Let me just move that out of the way. So just a light coat to start with, and just see how we think it's starting to look. What we want is for it to look like there's a build-up of dirt. You never want to go too heavy when you're doing this. You can always add to it. It's very, very difficult to take it back. Okay, so if I just show you that up close, it's added a very subtle dirt, dust, whatever you want to call it, yeah? And I think I'm going to leave that colour now, and we're going to move to the next one. I might just do a very fine mist slightly higher up. Just like that. Right, so we're going to get rid of this paint and move to the next colour. How do I clean my airbrush between colours? Pipette with some water, suck the mucky stuff out. Keep doing that until it's pretty much running clear. It doesn't take as long as you think. Just spray some water through. You should be able to see that that's pretty close to being clear. I'm just going to spray it off camera onto a tissue, and it's now spraying clear, which tells me it's now ready for the next colour. Into the airbrush. Do not spray it directly on the model. Do a test piece on some tissue or something, just in case there is a little bit of that previous colour in there. So now we're going to come in slightly heavier. Just to get that blend in there. Get the frame as well. Don't worry about the wheels, we can sort the wheels after. We can clean them up after. It takes 2 seconds. So on the ends we're going to go fairly heavy. Like like so. So I'm just debating now on whether I want to do a slight dusting along the top, which I think I'm going to do. It's going to be very subtle. And you're probably not going to be able to see it on camera. So I'm happy with that, but what I am going to do is I'm just going to give it one last coat of that darker colour we used first. Yep. And we're just going to run it along the bottom. Quite light. And then even lighter just across the top. Just like that. Right, so that side, looking at that, I'm not 100% keen on that. Whereas that side I think looks much better. So just to dull this part down, I could put a flat brown on there. Yeah, let's just try a flat brown. I know you're probably thinking that it's just, I'm sort of wasting my time now, but I think if you're not happy with it, get it to a point of where you are happy. Oops. Right, I'm already much happier with that. I'm going to leave the ends as they are. Yeah, right. I'm so much happier with that. Like I say, if you're not happy, just change it. To me, that looks just right, really. And as you can see, it's completely changed, dulled down those rough streaks that we did with the oil paints. I think that's done. Now, obviously, I need to do the top, but I'm going to do the top when I do the inside. So, well, the inside's pretty straightforward, really. It's usually just powders. But I'm going to call that done. All I need to do now is apply a final matte varnish that'll dull everything off, and I'll upload a picture at the end of the video. But thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.